The humming of the servers was the heartbeat of Sterling Systems. For 23 years, it had been the most constant sound in my life, a low, steady thrumming that was more familiar than silence. I knew every rack, every cable, every blinking light in the main data center. I'd designed the layout, written the scripts that kept it all talking to itself, built the digital fortress line by line, firewall by firewall. My name was Victoria, and I wasn't just an employee here. I was the architect, the guardian, the quiet force that kept everything running smoothly, day in and day out. Thomas Sterling, the founder, was an old-school visionary. He built this company from the ground up, valued hard work, and most importantly, he valued people. He wasn't a tech guy himself, but he knew talent when he saw it. When he promoted me to head systems architect 10 years ago, he didn't just give me a title. He gave me autonomy and trust. We worked closely, especially on securing the company's future. That's when the clause was added to my executive contract, the Emergency System Governance Clause. We designed it together, a fail-safe, a last resort to protect the core infrastructure and sensitive data from anything that might jeopardize the company's integrity through incompetence or malicious intent. It was buried deep in the legal text, something only Thomas and I, and the legal team who drafted it, knew the true implications of. It gave me the authority to lock down critical systems if certain conditions were met, specifically if I was terminated without just cause or proper severance, as defined in the agreement. Thomas called it our insurance policy. I called it peace of mind. Things began to shift when Thomas's health declined. He had to step back, and the reins were handed to his son Michael. Michael Sterling. Early 30s, fresh out of business school after drifting through a few other things, more interested in tailored suits and buzzwords than the actual work happening in the building. From the moment he walked in, the air changed. The friendly, collaborative atmosphere Thomas fostered was replaced by an icy, corporate chill. Michael saw employees not as assets, but as numbers on a spreadsheet, easily replaced, easily discarded. He particularly disliked me. I think it stemmed from his brief, failed internship years ago. He was supposed to be learning about the tech side, but mostly he showed up late and played on his phone. At one point, he tried implementing a simple code change he'd learned in a weekend course. It was monumentally reckless, opening a backdoor that could have exposed millions of client records. I caught it immediately, fixed it silently, and reported it only to Thomas, who handled it discreetly. I didn't throw Michael under the bus, but he knew I knew. My competence was a mirror to his lack thereof, and he hated me for it. I saw it in the way he avoided my gaze, the dismissive wave of his hand when I tried to explain a system's complexity, the thinly veiled contempt. I knew my time was limited. The end came on a Tuesday afternoon. The office was quieter than usual, a nervous energy crackling in the air. Michael had been holding a series of abrupt, private meetings all morning. Sarah Jenkins, Thomas's loyal, longtime assistant who'd stayed on, gave me a knowing, sympathetic look as I passed her desk. My inbox pinged. Meeting. My office. 3 p.m. Michael Sterling. No subject line, no pleasantries. Just the summons. I finished the critical task I was on, saved my work, and stood up. Jacob Chin, one of my best senior analysts, looked up from his screen, his brow furrowed. "Everything okay, Victoria?" he asked, his voice low. I gave him a small, calm smile. Just a chat. Probably about budget cuts or some new buzzword initiative. He didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "All right. See you later." I hoped so. Michael's office was everything Thomas's wasn't. Sterile, flashy, all sharp angles and expensive, uncomfortable furniture. He was sitting behind his large, polished desk, flanked by two sharp-looking individuals I didn't recognize. Probably his own new hires, brought in to witness this. He didn't look up as I entered, just gestured vaguely to a chair. I sat, my back straight, my face carefully neutral. He finally closed his laptop with a snap that echoed in the silent room. His eyes met mine, cold and devoid of recognition for the 2 decades I'd poured into his father's company. "Victoria," he began, his voice flat, bored. "You've been here a long time." 23 years next month, I corrected him softly. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Right. Ancient history. Look, let's cut to the chase. We're streamlining, optimizing, cutting dead weight. He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly, but loud enough for his silent companions to hear. Frankly, your role is obsolete. You're an expensive piece of legacy code I'm deleting from the payroll. An anchor dragging us down. You're not contributing to the new vision. You're completely useless. The words landed like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but my face remained a mask. I met his gaze steadily. He wanted a reaction. Tears, begging, anger. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. You're not worth another dime of this company's resources, he finished, his tone laced with finality and contempt. I nodded slowly, my gaze unwavering. Understood, I said quietly, the single word hanging in the air. He blinked, clearly taken aback by my lack of protest. He'd expected drama fight. My calm acceptance seemed to deflate him slightly. He recovered quickly, a smug smirk touching his lips. Good. Saves us all some time. HR will be in touch regarding arrangements. I stood up smoothly, pushing the chair back without a sound. I turned towards the door, my hand on the cool metal of the doorknob. You might want to have your legal team review my full executive contract first, Michael, I said, my voice still quiet but carrying an unexpected weight. I paused, looking back at him. Specifically, the terms regarding termination without just cause or severance. It's on page 37, section 4B. Thomas insisted on it. You really should read it. He frowned, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, but dismissed it with a shrug. Whatever. HR will figure it out. I didn't wait for another word. I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. I walked past Sarah, who gave me a look of alarm. I walked past Jacob and Olivia in the IT bullpen, their faces etched with concern. I kept walking through the lobby, out the glass doors, and into the crisp afternoon air. I didn't look back. 23 years, dismissed in less than 5 minutes. The insult burned, hot and raw. But beneath the pain, a steely resolve began to form. Michael Sterling had just made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. Instead of heading straight home, I took a detour. I drove to the quiet cemetery on the edge of town, the one where my parents were buried. They were teachers, modest and hardworking, who believed fiercely in integrity and effort. I sat on the cool grass between their headstones, the familiar ache in my chest mingling with the fresh wound Michael had inflicted. I told them what happened, whispering into the silent air. They had always told me to stand up for myself, for what was right, even when it was hard. Michael's words, useless, worthless, relic, echoed in my mind. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about every unseen employee, every dedicated worker dismissed by someone who saw only numbers and disregarded human value. It was about upholding the principles my parents and Thomas had lived by. Drawing a deep breath, I felt their silent encouragement. My resolve solidified. It was time to activate the insurance policy. Back home, I went straight to my old fireproof box and retrieved the official copy of my executive contract. The paper felt heavy in my hands. I found page 37, section 4B. There it was, the language Thomas and I had crafted years ago, vetted by lawyers. It explicitly stated that in the event of my termination without just cause or the severance package detailed elsewhere, which included a minimum payout and a structured transition period, none of which Michael had offered, I was granted extraordinary administrative authority to lock access to, quarantine, or render inoperable critical system components and data infrastructure to prevent potential compromise or mismanagement under unauthorized or incompetent control. It was watertight, a legal defense against precisely the kind of reckless takeover Michael represented. Thomas had insisted on it, foreseeing that someone without my specific knowledge could unintentionally or intentionally jeopardize the entire system. He trusted me implicitly to be the last line of defense. Michael's biggest error wasn't just firing me. It was doing it improperly and, more importantly, doing it without understanding the intricate, bespoke nature of the systems I had built or the legal framework put in place to protect them. He thought I was just a technician. He didn't realize I held the keys to his kingdom. I spent the evening methodically preparing. I didn't need to be physically in the office. I had secure remote access, a capability I'd built and maintained carefully over the years. I reviewed the sequence, confirmed protocols. There was no joy in this, only grim necessity. This wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Michael's arrogance had triggered a system designed to protect the company from him. The next morning was strangely calm. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, the laptop open before me. The Sterling Systems network dashboard loaded, showing all systems running, all access points active. It was unbelievable. Michael and his team hadn't even bothered to revoke my primary credentials or change critical administrator passwords. They were either incredibly lazy, unbelievably arrogant, or truly had no idea what I controlled. Probably all three. This confirmed it. He was incompetent, a threat to the company's stability. Activating the protocol was not just justified. It felt necessary. With a deep breath, I navigated to the secure admin panel. A few clicks, confirming the activation of the emergency lockdown protocol under the terms of Section 4B. The system prompted for verification of termination conditions met. I confirmed termination without cause, no severance offered. Access granted. I initiated the sequence. It wasn't a single switch, it was a cascade. First, the employee portal flickered offline, no internal email, no access to company documents, no HR forms. Then the financial systems, payroll processing halted, accounts payable frozen, access to client billing databases locked. David Miller's sales team's CRM went dark, client contact information and deal pipelines suddenly inaccessible. The internal communication platform died. Manufacturing schedules disappeared from factory floor displays. Even basic functions like accessing secure printer networks or ordering office supplies through the company portal stopped working. I didn't delete anything. That would have been illegal and against the clause's purpose. I simply locked down all access, effectively putting the company's digital operations into a medically induced coma. The data was safe, held in limbo, waiting for authorized access to be restored. I watched the dashboard indicators turn red, system by system, application by application. The digital heartbeat of Sterling Systems slowed, sputtered, and went silent. It was strangely anticlimactic on my end. Then my phone began to explode. First, a flood of confused texts from Jacob. Vic. Systems down. Total blackout. What's going on? Nobody knows anything. Followed quickly by, Michael is losing it. Screaming in the hallway. Sarah messaged, board meeting being called urgently. Eleanor Vance is demanding answers. Stay strong. My phone rang a block number. I declined. Then the main Sterling Systems line. Declined again. David Miller texted, Victoria, our sales team is paralyzed. Clients are calling nonstop. Do you know anything about this? Finally, Michael called. His name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, then answered. My voice was calm level. Victoria speaking. What did you do? He shrieked, panic making his voice crack. I could hear chaos in the background, shouts, ringing phones that weren't working, the sound of pure pandemonium. I followed my contract, Michael. I replied simply. Section 4B. Emergency System Governance. You really should have read it. You shut down the entire company, he yelled. No, I corrected him. I locked access to it. There's a difference. The data is secure. No loss. The systems are in quarantine mode, just as the protocol specifies to prevent unauthorized or incompetent control. You're insane. You're going to jail. My actions are illegal, Michael, I said. They are a direct contractual consequence of your actions, terminating me without cause or severance, in clear violation of the agreement. You triggered the failsafe. This is on you. Silence for a moment, except for the background noise. I could picture him pacing, running a hand through his slicked back hair. He didn't understand the technology, the contracts, the consequences. He thought firing me was just removing a name from a list. He never comprehended the intricate machine I was, holding all the pieces together. How do I fix this? His voice was lower now, a hint of desperation creeping in. You don't, I stated. You're not authorized. Access is locked to unauthorized personnel, which includes you now. Per the clause. Another long pause. Then, barely a whisper, defeated. So, what do you want? I could have demanded a fortune. I could have asked for his job, though I didn't want it. But this wasn't about money or power in that sense. It was about value. About respect. About proving that dedication and competence weren't worthless. I want you to admit you were wrong, I said. Not just to me. Publicly. To the board, to the employees, to the clients. I want a formal written retraction of my termination, signed by you and the board, acknowledging the breach of contract. And I want a public apology from you, stating that you were wrong to call me useless and that you underestimated my contribution and the systems I built. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You think I'm going to humiliate myself like that? Michael, I said, my voice unwavering. I think you don't have a choice. Every minute those systems are down, your reputation, the company's future, and your father's legacy are bleeding out. Your options are shrinking rapidly. I hung up before he could respond, leaving him in the digital silence he had created. The next 2 days were a blur of ignored calls and monitoring the escalating crisis from afar through news reports and messages from my network inside Sterling Systems. Jacob reported that the IT department was in chaos, completely unable to figure out how to bypass the lockout, impressed and bewildered by how thorough it was. It's like, you built a ghost in the machine, Vic, he texted. Nobody can even find the right interface. Sarah confirmed that Eleanor Vance and the board were furious with Michael, who was flailing, bringing in expensive external cybersecurity firms who promised quick results but found themselves completely stumped by my custom architecture. David Miller sent increasingly frantic updates about major clients initiating breach of contract proceedings. The company's stock was plummeting. My actions weren't malicious destruction. They were a strategic paralysis. I hadn't broken the system. I had engaged its ultimate security feature. It was a nuclear option, yes, but Michael's arrogance had necessitated it. On the third evening, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in months, maybe a year. It was Thomas Sterling. His voice was slower, weaker than I remembered, marked by age and illness, but still firm. Lisa, he said, using my full first name. Victoria. I heard what happened. Mr. Sterling, I said, surprised but calm. Hello. I should have called sooner, he sighed. I've been out of touch. But Diane Eleanor Vance briefed me. And I've read everything, including that contract we signed. There was a pause. I want you to know, I stand by that agreement, Victoria. I gave you that authority because you earned my absolute trust. And I see now precisely how necessary it was. His words meant more than any apology Michael could offer. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I said softly, genuine emotion catching in my throat. He hesitated. Would you be open to a meeting? Just you and me. No board, no Michael. I think we need to talk about how to put things right. For the company. For everyone who works there. I agreed immediately. We met the next afternoon at a quiet cafe far from the city. Thomas looked older, frielier than the last time I'd seen him, but his eyes still held that familiar spark of intelligence and integrity. We talked for a while about his health, about the company's beginnings. Then he got to the point. I gave Michael the helm hoping he would rise to the occasion, he said, his voice heavy with regret, hoping he would learn to value what truly matters. Instead, he led with ego, with ignorance. He looked directly at me. You were the safeguard, Victoria. The one person I knew would protect the core, the heart of what we built. And now, you're the only one who can save it. I listened, watching him. The cafe was peaceful, a world away from the chaos engulfing Sterling Systems. I'm not asking you to forgive him, Thomas continued, anticipating my thoughts. His actions were inexcusable. I'm asking if you will help fix this. Not for Michael. For the company. For Jacob, for Sarah, for David, for all the good people who still depend on it. My jaw tightened slightly. He called me worthless, Mr. Sterling. Dismissed 23 years like it was nothing. If I come back, if I help, it has to mean something. It has to be a clear statement of my value, not a quiet return to the shadows. Thomas nodded slowly. I understand. And I think it's time we talk about just that. He slid a document across the small table. It wasn't a job offer. It was a partnership agreement. Co-ownership of the company's core technology infrastructure, permanent executive authority over all systems and operations reporting directly to the board, a significant equity stake in the company, public acknowledgement of my foundational role in Sterling Systems' success, and a critical role in selecting the company's new leadership. Michael will be stepping down, Thomas stated firmly. Effective immediately after the emergency board meeting tomorrow. He doesn't know the full extent yet, but the motion is already in place. The board has lost all confidence. I blinked, taking it all in. And who replaces him? Thomas offered a faint smile. We're open to nominations. We need someone with competence, integrity, and a deep understanding of the company's operations and values. Someone the board trusts. Someone you trust. It hit me then, the full scope of what he was offering. He wasn't just giving me my job back. He was giving me the power to shape the company's future, to ensure it never suffered under arrogant incompetence again. It wasn't the CEO position. I didn't want that kind of public-facing role, but it was arguably more powerful within my domain. It was the ultimate validation. I reviewed the documents later that night. It was real. The terms were explicit, generous, and backed by Thomas's authority and the board's desperation. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The storm outside was raging, but I was in control of the calm within its eye. I had one more decision to make, one last act to perform. The next morning, I stood before the full board of directors on a video call. Michael was there too, looking utterly defeated, eyes hollow, his usual arrogance replaced by slumped shoulders and a vacant stare. Eleanor Vance, the board member, addressed me formally. Miss Victoria, she began, her tone respectful now, devoid of the earlier tension. We understand that access to our critical systems remains restricted. Are you willing to restore full functionality to Sterling Systems? I met her gaze steadily. Yes, Ms. Vance. I am. A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the board members visible on screen. Under what conditions? Eleanor asked, getting straight to the point. I took a breath. My conditions weren't just about my own vindication. They were about the people who had endured the chaos Michael caused. My terms are as follows, contingent on the signed agreement with Mr. Sterling regarding my new role in equity being legally binding immediately. First, the entire IT department, everyone who worked under me, is to receive back pay for the duration of the system lockdown, compensating them for the impossible situation they were put in. Second, every engineer and analyst on my former team is to receive a significant raise, a minimum of 20%, and all contractors in the department are to be immediately converted to permanent, full-time employees with full benefits. I added a final point, something about a dedicated fund for team training and infrastructure upgrades, ensuring they had the resources they needed going forward. These systems are built on their hard work too. They deserve recognition and support. Eleanor Vance exchanged a brief, impressed look with another board member. Done, she said without hesitation. Agreed. We will execute those terms immediately. I nodded. I opened my laptop, connected to the secure network endpoint Thomas and I had built years ago. Navigating to the admin panel, I entered the sequence to release the lockdown protocol. It was a series of commands I knew by heart. Type, confirm, execute. Across the city, at the Sterling Systems headquarters, the digital lights flickered back on. Servers hummed to life. Network switches reconnected. Terminals booted up. Payroll systems re-engaged. Client portals unlocked. Communication lines flowed freely again. The digital heart of the company began to beat, strong and steady. I looked at Michael on the screen one last time. His eyes were fixed on his desk. He wouldn't meet my gaze. It didn't matter. This wasn't his story anymore. The company slowly recovered. Clients returned, reassured by the swift resolution and Michael's removal. The stock price stabilized. Life returned to normal, at least on the surface. I spent the next few weeks working closely with Thomas and the board, not in my old role, but in my new capacity, helping select competent leadership, overseeing the restructuring of the tech department, ensuring the systems were not only running but resilient. I made sure Jacob was promoted and that Olivia, the young engineer I mentored, was given opportunities to shine. One afternoon, Jacob found me in the main server room, the familiar hum surrounding us. I wasn't fixing anything. I was just being there, saying goodbye to the old era. He's gone, you know, Jacob said softly. Michael cleared out his office this morning. Didn't say a word to anyone. I nodded. About time. Did you expect him to say anything? To you? I smiled faintly. He already said everything he needed to say when he called me useless. His silence now is just confirmation. Jacob leaned against a server rack. You know, Victoria, what you did. Locking everything down. Standing up to him. We all saw it. Every single person here. We weren't just impressed. We were proud. You stood up for all of us who've ever been undervalued. Dismissed by someone with a title but no understanding. His words caught me off guard, bringing a lump to my throat. I hadn't sought to be a hero, just to enforce a contract and reclaim my worth. But hearing that meant something. Thank you, Jacob, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Months passed. Sterling Systems found its footing under new leadership, guided in part by my expertise. Michael Sterling vanished from the tech scene as quickly as he'd appeared. His downfall was quiet total. Arrogance built on nothing tends to collapse spectacularly and often silently. One afternoon, while working from my home office, a message popped up. Hey, it's Michael. Can I call? I stared at the screen for a long time. Curiosity, not malice, finally won. Yes, I typed back. He called moments later. His voice was hesitant, quiet, devoid of any trace of the arrogance that had defined him. He sounded small. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, he began, his voice tired. You're not wrong, I said calmly. A heavy silence stretched. I just wanted to say, I was wrong. About everything. About you. He took a shaky breath. I didn't understand what you did, how much you carried. I thought, I don't know, that the tech was just software, easily replaced. I thought loyalty was optional. I thought people were disposable. It's not, I said softly. It never was. I lost everything, he admitted. Investors, my reputation, even my dad doesn't really talk to me anymore. That's between you and him, Michael, I said. Not my business. You don't have to forgive me, he said quickly. I needed to say it. Out loud. To you. Then say it clearly. He paused, gathering himself. I'm sorry, Victoria. For disrespecting you. For calling you useless. For underestimating you. For not reading the damn contract. You didn't deserve any of it. I let his words hang in the air, letting the weight of them settle. Apologies couldn't erase the past, but they could acknowledge the truth. Apology accepted, Michael, I said finally. But don't mistake that for forgetting. I wouldn't dare. That was it. He thanked me awkwardly and hung up. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Hearing his apology wasn't about closure with him. It was closure for me. It was the final, quiet confirmation that my value wasn't defined by his ignorance or disrespect. A few months later, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for my own company's new office, Arcturus Solutions. It wasn't a sprawling corporate campus. It was a bright, functional space filled with fast computers and even faster minds. My team wasn't huge, but they were sharp, passionate, and shared a belief in competence, integrity, and mutual respect. Some were faces I knew well, like Olivia Rodriguez, who had joined me, her eyes full of the same wonder I felt when I first started building systems. I gave a short speech. Nothing grand. Just the truth. I built my career in the shadows, I said, looking at my team, keeping the engines running while others took the credit. I learned that true worth isn't always loud or visible. It's in the foundation, in the details, in the resilience you build in, not just in the technology, but in the relationships, the trust, the loyalty. That night, back in my own quiet home, I made a cup of tea and sat in my favorite chair. I didn't set an alarm. For the first time in over 2 decades, I knew, with absolute certainty, that the systems were secure. And more importantly, so was I.